CIS 225 network routing and protocols. Now we're going into week 2. I know most of you guys lucky did pretty good week 1. I was grading your projects especially, and it seems like you're getting there. Week 2, now we're going to shift it up a little bit. But before we do, let's do a quick review of week 1. You remember week 1 from the bingo analogy, right? Where you had 256 chairs, and we went through that. I'm not going to go through that in depth, but then when we did our subnetting in week 1, we just did regular subnetting, okay, where you divided the room, you know, in half, or you could divide it in quarters, and that's okay. But the problem we have with this type of subnetting, and you may have seen it already, is that you can have wasted space. Here's what I mean. Let's say if you did this subnetting, right, into four subnets with 64 chairs or 62 assignable. But let's say only 14 people show up every week. Well, if you do that, now you've got what, multiple chairs that goes unused, a lot of wasted space. Same thing with IP addresses. So that's kind of the problem with this static type of subnetting. But what we're going to get into this week is, and I'm not even going to go through that. That's what we covered last week, right? But what we're going to get into more so this week is variable length subnet masking. Now, what this allows us to do, VLSM, variable length subnet masking, allows us to vary the size of the rooms, okay? So let's take this same example, right? We got the same room with 256 chairs, and now I want 128 chairs. I would need one large room that I can have 126 usable chairs, right? So that would be my first subnet. So I would just divide the room in half. With regular subnetting, if you remember, I'd have 128 chairs here, and then I'd have a 128 there. But instead, let's say I need a second room that doesn't have 128, but I only need 62. Well, that's what I would be able to do. I could divide this up, get 64 chairs. That will give me 62 usable. Now I need a third room that needs 30 chairs. So you see, now I've got variable length subnets. 126 usable here, 62 usable here, 30 usable here, and I can keep going with that. Let's say if I wanted my last room to have two chairs, right? So I can even break it all the way down to that, where we got 4 usable chairs. And if I do the math on that, if I add all these together, 128, 64, 32, and 4, you see that leaves me 28 chairs available for a future expansion. Variable length. Instead of having to divide everything equally like we did last week, now we're going to divide with variable length subnet mask. So this is what we're going to do in week 2. We're going to take our network and we're going to redefine, we're going to have to do some resubnetting to do variable length subnet masking. Now I'm going to give you an example of how you do this, okay, with VLSM. So let's say, here we go, here's an example. I've got 4 subnets. My first subnet, I need 126 hosts. My second subnet, I need 50 hosts. And my third subnet, I need 18. And my fourth subnet, I need 2, okay? We're going to walk through this. So I've got an IP address of 196.168.10.0 CIDR 24. So that gives us a subnet mask of what? 255.255.255.0. All right. I always start off with my little handy dandy cheat sheet chart here, okay? With the masks, the bits, host, subnets, and what it's incrementing. So let's take a look at this first subnet. How much do I need? I need 126. Okay, so for 126 IP addresses, I'm going to subnet this using the .128. I'm going to increment by 128, and that will give me what? 2 subnets, and it gives me 126 usable chairs. So I've got my first subnet taken care of. And now how would I list this out? The same way. Okay, my subnet ID 192.168.10.0. First usable host is going to be .1. The last usable host 126. Broadcast 127. And my CIDR, coming right off my chart up here, right, is 25. CIDR 25. So that covers the number of hosts that I need. So that's my first subnet. And if you see the masked, is 255.255.255.128. Now, my second subnet, I need 50 hosts, okay? So to get 50 hosts, where do I need to subnet? You're right here. because of that set bar, that second bit. So for 50 hosts, I have to subnet at 64 or increment at 64, which now I'll start my second subnet where I left off with the first one. So if you look at the last usable IP address, the last IP address was the broadcast of 127. So that means that my subnet ID is going to be 192.168.10.128 for the second subnet. That's where it's going to start, 128. Now, if you look, I have incremented at 64. So now I'm just going to use 64 IP addresses. So my first usable host is going to be 129. Okay. The last is going to be 190. And the broadcast is 191. So that is my 64 IP addresses. The 62 usable are between 129 and 190. So that's how I get my 62. Now, if you notice, what changes here also is that my CIDR changes, because now I'm CIDR as a /26. So my subnet ID is 192.168.10.128 with a CIDR of 26. And that gives me a subnet mask of 255.255.255.192. So last week, if you notice, our subnet mask stayed the same based on the way that we subnetted. This week, our subnet mask changes because based on the variable length and then based on each of how many hosts we need in each subnet. Okay, tracking along with that. All right, let's go to subnet mask. Network 3. In network 3, I need 18 host. So what is the where would I have to subnet to get 18? Well, I can't do 14, right? So I actually have to come up here to 30. So that's where I'm going to subnet to be able to get 18 usable hosts. So it's going to be a CIDR of 27. It's going to be the 22.224 is going to be the mask. And if we look at our build, yeah, here we go. Now where I'm going to start where my last one left off at, which was 191. So now for my third subnet, it's going to start with 192.168.10.192. And I'm incrementing and at 32. So I'm going to have 32 IP addresses. So the first usable, 193. The last host is going to be 222. The broadcast is 223. CIDR is what? 27. Okay. And that covers the number of hosts. I needed 30. I needed 18. I'm sorry. That should be a 30 there. I needed 18, so I've got a total of 30. So I'm covered in this subnet. But look what my mask is, right? .224. So you see that subnet mask changes as we go through this, each one. And in my last one, I need 2 IP addresses. So to get 2, yes, right here. I can subnet right there, and that's on CIDR 30. CIDR 30 actually gives me 4 IP addresses, but here again, only 2 are usable. And where do I start with this one? Where I left off before. Hopefully you see in that pattern, right? So 192.168.10.224. That's where my that is my subnet ID. First usable 225. Last one is 226. Broadcast is 227. And as you see, I've got from IP address 228 all the way to 254 that I can still assign. So those are for expansion. So this gives me my 4 subnet that I need. These are my 4 subnet IDs, and it also tells me which IP addresses that I'm going to be able to assign in each one of those. That is VLM. That's how variable length subnet masking works, okay? VLM. Now, in this week, you've got an IP mastery 2.8, and it gives you, basically, you're going to be doing the same thing, okay? I'm just going to walk you through one example to kind of give you a head start. So this is an example. All right, you're assigned the network of 192.68.66.0 with a CIDR of 24. All right, you must subdivide the network using VLSM to meet the IP addressing needs of the network you manage. And it wants you to fill in the subnet column using your network address and CIDR notation. Fill in the table. Okay, so I've got 3 subnets. Subnet 1, the purpose is inside. Number of hosts you need. is 105. So I will subnet that at CIDR 25. And we're going to walk through this as well. The second one is phishing. I need 59. And that's where it's going to look like. The third one, IT, 25. So let's take a look at how we came up with those. The exact same way we did it before, right? So my first subnet, I need 105 hosts. I'm going to increment at 128, okay? So 128, I start with my subnet ID of 192.68.66.0, first assignable, .1, last assignable, .126, broadcast is 128, and what my subnet mask is 255.255.128. The second one, I need 59. So I have to increment at 64 to get 59. And I walk through the same thing. I start at 128 because my last, the IP address I use on the broadcast here was 127. So I start here at 128 and I do the same thing. The subnet mask here is going to be .192. Why? Because I am incrementing at 64. The third one is the IT. I need 25 hosts, incrementing at 32. And the same thing. This follows the same process. And the subnet mask is .224 because I am incrementing at 32. So now you see how we came up with the correct answers just based on how we lay out our subnets, our IP addresses for each subnet. All right, makes sense? Hope so. If not, you can rewind it and watch it again. Okay, let's go into phase 2 of our project. I want to be sure everybody makes it through this project, because if you can do the project, I think you've got everything else covered. Okay, in phase 2, this week, phase 2, we are going to add a second building. Okay, if you remember phase 1, this was phase 1, which you had down here. You had one router, two networks. I think it was accounting and the executive network, and you had switches there. This week, we're adding a second building, which means we're going to add a second router, and we're going to add 2 more networks, one for engineering and one for the IT help desk. Now, things are going to change up a little bit because now we're going to have to connect these 2 routers together. And there are some different protocols. We're going to really get into now your different routing protocols that allows your routers to talk to each other. And you're going to have to make some modifications to that router in week 2, meaning that you're going to have to add a serial port card into your router this week. So there's some configuration changes you're going to do on the router, and which is going to give you some different interfaces. Right now, that router that we worked with in week 1, we just had 2 gigabit interfaces that talk to the switches. Now, to get 2 routers to talk to each other, we have to have serial interfaces. And you'll see them as S1 or S2, whatever. So that's what connects your routers. And we're also going to talk about different routing protocols, static routing as well as dynamic routing. And for the purpose of this class, we're going to be using EIGRP, Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol, as a protocol to be able to allow routers to talk dynamically. We're also going to have you do static routing, where you're going to manually type in the static routes to ensure that this network can go reach this network, and it knows which router to go to get from one network to the other. So as we add our second building this week, we got like 20 PCs we're going to be needing for the help desk, 1 for the printer, 1 for the server. And then in the engineering section, we're going to add 10 PCs, an engineering printer, and a server. Like I say, going to add a second router and 2 more Cisco switches. And we're going to configure static routes on both of these to be sure that we can talk between the 2. And I think in week 3, that's when we're going to add in dynamic routing. Okay, so this is what your network diagram is going to look like. All right, like I say, two networks. Building 1 that has a router with 2 networks on it. Your accounting networks and executive network. This is what you built last week. And here we go. You're also going to have your second building that's going to have the IT and engineering. So one of the first things you want to do when we do this, as we build this out, is to identify your networks. So like I say, you got the accounting subnet, we got the exec subnet, we already worked those last week. This week we got the IT help desk and we have engineering. Is that all of the networks? No, there's one more that we have to account for when we, especially when we're going to start assigning IP addresses, and that is your router 1 to router 2 subnet. You have to allocate an IP address pairs for this piece right here. Very important that we don't forget that. So now when we talk about number of hosts, now if you look at this, you have, wait a minute, back on your other page, you were saying that you only needed 12 in accounting. Well, I do. Let's say for accounting, I needed, what, 10 PCs, 1 printer, and 1 server, right? That is 12. However, you're also going to need an IP address for that interface, so you don't want to lose those. That's why you have to add an extra one to each one of these, because these interfaces on the routers, your gigabit interfaces, is going to require 1 IP address as well, which will be your, typically your default gateway IP address. So when you're thinking about how many hosts you're going to need, be sure to add that in. So we're going to need 13 for accounting, exec's going to need 23, engineering section is going to need 13, and the IT guys are going to need 23, and we're going to need 2 for the router. For router 1, to make this connection right here, we're going to need 2 IP addresses to cover that. So that's how many. We've got 5 subnets that we're going to have to build our network and do the subnetting for. So let's walk through the example, okay? So let's take our IP address, 172.16.x or 10. Like I say, I always use the number 10 as an instructor, right? .0 CIDR 24. That's our IP address. This is what we need. This is how many subnets with how many hosts we're going to need. Start out here again with our handy dandy chart. So accounting needs 13. How do I get 13? Which is the closest I can get? You're right, 16. So I'm going to subnet this first subnet at .240. That's going to give me 14 available hosts. Okay. So if I look at this now, and just like we did before, I've got a CIDR 28, 14 available hosts. Total of 16 subnets, but we don't really need that right now. So what we got 172, that's going to be .16.10.0. That's going to be our subnet ID for this first subnet. And now I can use these hosts to assign to the accounting department from 1 to 14. What is going to be my subnet ID? 172.16.10.0 CIDR 28, subnet mask 255.255.255.240. Comes right off the chart right there. All right, let's take a look at the second subnet, the executive. I need 23. How do I get 23? Well, looking at my chart, that tells me I'm going to have to subnet right here to get 23. This gives me a total of 30 usable. Yeah, I can get 23 out of 30. And I do the same thing. So where do I start on this one? You got it, guys, where I left off on my last one. My broadcast address was .15. So I'm going to come here, start at .16, 172.16.10.16. That is the subnet ID for that engineering network. Then my host is going to be 17 through 46, and the broadcast is 47 because I'm incrementing at 32. So those are my 32 IP addresses, 16 up to 47. Now, what is the CIDR? 27. All right, we got that right off the chart. And that's going to give us the subnet mask of .224. Looking at our next subnet, engineering. I need 13. All right, so the same thing. If I need 13 for engineering, I can still go back and use that .240. But where do I start? I'm going to start at 48, right? .48, 172.16.10.48. First usable, 49. Last host is going to be 60. Broadcast is 63. CIDR, just like it was the last time I used .240, is 28. And you see the subnet mask for this one is the same as .240. So you see now how the subnet ID changes as well as the subnet mask based on where we subnetted. All right, what was that? That was engineering. If I look at IT, Well, guess what? They need 23 just like the executive. So it's going to be the same subnetting at the .224. What changes is my subnet ID, because now I'm starting at 64. Why? Because the last one was 63. Okay, so that is my subnet ID, 172.16.10.64. First usable, 65. Last usable is what? 94. And the broadcast is 95. Now the last one right here, R1 to R2, those I need 2. So to get 2, where am I going to subnet? Well, I can't go back here, right? Because that gives me, I don't have any IP addresses to assign. So where can I go is to .252, right? That gives me 2 assignable hosts. Now, here's what we're going to do for these router for R1 to R2. When we build our network, we're going to jump down a little ways. We're not going to pick it up at 96. So we're going to move down to 200. Why do we do this? Well, a lot of times in real world, when you're building a network, you may have to add additional routers later on. So you're going to push those kind of out of the way a little bit. So that gives you some expansion room in the middle. So now I still have some expansion room from 95 on. So, and also makes it easy if you're looking at a network topology or a network map to start understanding anything that's 200, IP address 200, you know, and up, those are your routers. So it's just a way of annotating that. So for the purpose of this, yeah, we're going to start at 200. So my subnet ID is going to be 172.16.10.200. The first assignable is going to be 201. The last assignable is 202. The broadcast 203. CIDR is going to be what? Coming right off the chart, 30. CIDR of 30. And I needed 2 hosts, and I've got them. So, and if we look at our subnet ID, 172.16.10.200, CIDR 30. What's that subnet mask? 255.255.255.252. And it also still leaves us some expansion room later on if we need to expand. So because we still can go all the way to 254. 172.16.10.254. So we still have that many IP addresses. So you see now, this is a lot more of an efficient way of subnetting when it comes to IP addresses using VLSM. This is the host that we needed. These are the subnets we needed. And this is now how we can lay out the IP address scheme for all those subnets. Okay. Now that we've got that, now we can move to the next step of assigning those IP addresses. So here's our network, right? This is just where we left off on the last slide. So first thing I'm going to do is take this first subnet, which is what engineer accounting, the subnet ID 172.16.10.0. I'm going to assign the first host to the router, R1 to the gigabit Ethernet interface 000. And that's the subnet mask. And then I will start assigning IP addresses to the accounting host. So, you know, if I needed 10 computers, I think I would start at .2 and keep going till I've assigned those 10. Then I'll assign the printer and the server. And that's how I would do the accounting subnet. Likewise with the executive subnet, same thing. My second here, this second line, this is my IP address range for the executive. The subnet ID is .16, so the first one that's assignable is 17, and I'm going to do what? I'm going to give that to the interface, the 17, and then I will start assigning IP addresses accordingly, 18 through ever how many I need for computers. After that, the printer, and then the scanner. So you see how we go? We're doing the same thing. Now we go to router 2. In router 2, which for the engineering network is going to start at the first assignable is going to be .49. And you just follow that same scheme all the way through. The same with IT, how you can lay that out. And the same thing when you get to those serial interfaces on the routers. So I have 2 IP addresses to hosts, so I'll give one of them to one. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter which one you give which one to. It's okay. You can give 201 to the router 1, or you can give it to router 2, but you're going to assign those to the serial ports on the router. And that is really how you're going to lay out your process, your week 2 project. Building on week 1, and actually you're going to have to resubnet everything because we're using VLSM. Okay, so you're not really building off week 1 from IP addressing, because you're going to have to resubnet using variable length subnet masking. Deliverables for this week. Like I said, you got you got to turn in your phase 2 phase 2 document, and just the same document that you use for week 1 for phase 1. Use the same document, just started at phase 2 all the way down. Okay, you're going to use the exact same document and resubmit that one. Also, you're going to submit your packet tracer. Please do not forget to submit your packet tracer, guys. I know that last week a couple of you guys forgot to attach the packet tracer, but I need to see the packet tracer because I want to be sure that not only you know how to do it academically, but you can actually build out the network, and I can be sure that I can ping from one to another, and I can look at your routing tables and things like that. So you have to submit your packet tracer, otherwise your grade will, you know, drop accordingly. And also this week you're going to build a Visio diagram. Okay, a Visio diagram of your network. And what's the purpose of this? What's the why? Well, we use Visio quite a bit in industry, in the field, to build out our network diagram. So this just gives you a little hands-on with Visio. Now here's what I will tell you. Sometimes people have problems getting Visio to load, or if you're going to use the Zen, the ECPI Zen desktop. Sometimes it works, and sometimes students have issues. Here's what I ask though. Please don't spend a lot of time if you can't get Visio to work. Use PowerPoint, okay? Really, and build out your network diagram the way in the instructions. I prefer Visio, but if you can't get Visio to work, you know, I don't want you to jump off the edge of the cliff. Just to go ahead and build that in PowerPoint and keep it moving. Keep it moving. All right, guys. Have a great week 2. Remember, my live session Tuesdays from 8:30 to 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. That's PM. And on Saturday mornings from 10 o'clock, I'm sorry, to 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So if you have questions, come in, chime in. Because really I'll cover pretty much the same thing in the lectures as well, but I will add a few different things. I always like talking about the cyber aspect of the reason why we do what we do. All right, again, any questions, you know, reach out and we'll try to help you out. Have a great week 2.